All right. One other little usability issue here. I guess since it's called Spellbook, you have a pretty good idea what you're adding, but it seems like this could use a label. We have a couple ways we can do that. One way is with an actual label attribute. This is not the way I'm going to do it permanently, so you can copy this down and commit it separately if you want to keep track of it, but I'm not going to keep it. One thing you could do is add an actual label element. Notice it says label 4. That's where you put the name. And then the contents, what's in between the opening and closing tag, are what you actually want the label to read. So spell name like that. What's the point of 4? Looks the same to me. Part of it's accessibility. So if you're visually impaired and you're using a screen reader or some other assistive technology, you have to tab through things. And when you get to this input, it'll tell you what the input is. If you didn't give it a label, it doesn't know what it's supposed to be. So the label actually helps make the connection between the label and the input. Another way to achieve the same thing, instead of giving it the 4 attribute, you could actually put the input inside the label element. You'll see that sometimes. Like this, actually have the input inside the label. Doesn't show up any different, and it accomplishes the same thing, so you can do it that way too. If you want to use a label, go right ahead. There's another way we could do it. Sometimes you'll see that there's already some text in there, but it goes away as soon as you start typing. Or actually, as soon as you start typing. Not like when we had a value on it. Anybody know how to do that? Placeholder. So we can add an attribute to it called placeholder. And just put our label in there. Spell name. Or say, enter a spell name. Refresh. There it is. It's kind of grayed out. It doesn't put my cursor at the end. It's still at the beginning. And as soon as I start typing, it goes away. Still seems like a nice addition. So placeholder. That is another HTML5 attribute, by the way. HTML5 has been around a while. It's not exactly hot off the presses, but just so you know. And all the browsers that you're probably going to encounter will support it. There's a.
You're doing your job.
Yeah.
Do you ever have to write a non-HTML5 just as an alternate version for the old?
Occasionally. Yeah, occasionally. More often, what you'll do is add something called. Why on earth am I blanking on this thing? What? Anybody know the word I'm looking for? Polyfill. Polyfill. Anybody ever heard that word before? You know what it is, Matt? Matt, you go by Matt, right? Yeah. Okay. I know we got some actual Jacobs and stuff like that in the afternoon. Do you know what it is? I've heard people talk about it. So basically, if you have newer features that you're trying to use, sometimes there are actual JavaScripts that have been written that will basically look through your code for any of that modern stuff and do a JavaScript solution for the same thing. So if it doesn't know what the placeholder attribute is, it'll still be there, and it could grab the value of that attribute with JavaScript and then kind of attempt to accomplish the same thing by making that text appear inside the box without the browser actually supporting that. So things like that. There are lots of polyfills for lots of features. They do tend to hurt performance a little, but sometimes they're necessary just to move things forward. So more often than not, that's how you get around those things. But a lot of times we don't even have to include those anymore, just depending on who the target audience is.
So what kind of target audience would you need to have that polyfill?
So for example, once we made something for a hospital network, and one of their campuses was stuck on Windows XP Service Pack 1, and everyone was using Internet Explorer 7, which is absolutely ancient at this point and doesn't support a lot of that stuff. So we just knew that was a reality. This was going to be used at all these hospitals, and one of the hospitals, by golly, was using IE7. So it was hard to even find a copy that we could test in. But we had to do stuff like that there. And like they couldn't upgrade. That wasn't an option because they had some piece of software that they rely on every day that will not work in anything newer. Which, you know, if you're writing stuff that breaks that easily, you're probably doing it wrong. With good habits, you can kind of make things more or less future-proof. As long as you're following the standards of the time, new browsers are not going to break old standards. But new browsers might break stuff that should never have worked that way in the first place. So stuff like that occasionally happens. It's rare these days that you have to use something that old, but like in that case, we just happen to know everybody was using IE7. Another case you might, if you have a client, I mean, what we do is kind of freelancing. So if you have a client and they have some stats from their web server that tell them people come here using an old browser a lot for whatever reason, maybe because people at hospitals visit their website a lot. If they happen to know their user data like that, then you might have to support them. That kind of stuff. Good question. Anything else? Cool.